So hi, everyone. It's Bob Ost. It's Theater Resources Unlimited. It's our Friday community gathering. It's July 14th. Happy Bastille Day. I just was reminded that it's Bastille Day. I feel like breaking out of something. I don't know what. We're doing a conversation with the room today. So I'm not sure whether we're going to be putting this on YouTube and podcasts or not, but we'll see what where the conversation goes. We're going to be talking to the community about issues that are concerning us right now, not the least of which is the fact that there's really kind of a horrible thing going on in the regional theaters and the not-for-profits. But they're dropping like flies right now. And I don't know if we're going to have any answers today, but I want to talk about what's going on and why this is happening and what the consequences will be for us and for theater going forward. Already having enough trouble with commercial theater, and now the not-for-profits are having problems, and I'm not convinced that it's COVID related. So I think, we're going to talk about that. We're also going to talk about the things that concern everybody in the room. So I'm going to actually spotlight myself, and I'm going to spotlight my guests. So be patient with me while I bring on RK Greene. And let me find Jane Dubin. I'm going to bring her on. Oh, here's Jane. And luckily, Guy is right next to her. So RK and Jane are commercial producers who both have had a lot of experience in the not-for-profit world. Jane in particular is very much connected with a not-for-profit theater company. And Guy Yedweb is like a great source of information about what's going on with alternative and indie theater. He's the vice president of the board of the League of Independent Theaters. So you guys introduce yourselves, and then we're gonna, if there's anything that you want to introduce as a topic of conversation, please do. But my topic of conversation right now is what the hell's going on with the not-for-profit world, right? Where the public theater is cutting 19% of its staff. They dropped the Under the Radar Festival. The Mark Taper Forum, I think it's the Mark Taper, isn't it? Is going dark. Long Wharf is on the way off of the cliff right now, and other staples of our American regional theater are having problems, real problems. So that's my issue, and we're going to hear other issues for other people in the room. So Arcade, you want to start, and then Jane, and then Guy.
Hi, everybody. Now, can you hear me well? I'm trying a new audio.
Absolutely, it's very good.
All right, great. Anyway, my name is RK Greene. I'm the executive director of the Storyline Project, which is my company that produces commercial theater. So Broadway, off-Broadway, tours, those types of things. We've also branched out into filming. We filmed a show that we have been developing called Bo, which is by Douglas Lyons and Ethan Pakchar. And we used that as an opportunity during the pandemic to keep the project moving and see where we could push it forward. I also wear a hat over at the Directors Company, which is a nonprofit, and I've worked with them for many years. Tentatively the marketing director, but so have good sights on what's happening in the nonprofit world, and have certainly worked with nonprofits a lot to develop what we hope become commercial theater productions.
RK, I was distracted for a second. Did you mention your work with Gretchen Schugert's company, the regional theater company that's run by Gretchen Schugert from?
Yes, I'm on the board of Theater Forward, which is a nonprofit that is formed some 40 years ago to support regional theaters. There were like 19 of them, including the Center Group, Seattle Rep, Guthrie, the Hartford, things like that. So some of the major regional theaters around the country, but looking to focus how we can funnel corporate money and support these organizations around the country.
Okay, I'm going to introduce Jane in a second, but I just want to say to the room, I really do want you to keep your cameras on. It's going to make a difference for us psychologically to actually be able to see the people we're talking to. And remember to use your virtual hand raises as well, or raise your hand. And if I see you, or if Owen sees you raising your hand, we'll know that you have a question that you want to bring up. So Jane, howdy. I think everybody knows you.
I know a lot of people here too, but I'm also glad to see a few new people, including Steve, who I met recently. And I am a commercial producer, Broadway, off-Broadway, London, et cetera, et cetera. Most recently did Dana H. and Is This a Room? Was with RK on Peter and the Starcatcher, An American in Paris, et cetera, et cetera. I have representation in the nonprofit world through my role as chair of the board of Houses on the Moon Theater Company, which is a company that has a mission of amplifying the unheard voice through theatrical endeavors and educational programs. I am currently shepherding a new musical through a non-traditional route. We have recently recorded the first 2 of what will be 7 episodes of a musical called The Village of Vale as an audio play. I just got to listen yesterday to the first draft of the first episode, almost complete, very exciting. I am, in my role as board chair of the nonprofit, extremely concerned about all the things that are going on around the country with audiences, with costs. I'm interested to hear whether people in this room have had experiences with their productions at nonprofits. Add Signature New York to your list, as they just announced the season with 3 shows.
Right.
I used to be a subscriber back then when they had 6 shows. I think last year they had 4. Oregon Shakespeare Festival that's trying to raise $7+ million after they just raised.
Oregon's very, very shaky right now. I mean,
yeah.
There's no guarantee that Oregon's going to come back, I don't think.
And I know I've heard from people in San Francisco.
Hired a brand new artistic director, friend of mine, named Tim Bond, who is taking over, who had been an associate artistic director of OSF for 11 years before going to Syracuse and then San Jose as well. So
their intention is to rebound.
Yeah.
Their intention is to rebound them.
Yeah, they had just recently hired a new director, and that didn't work, and they just raised another $2.5 million, and then now they said, well, we have to raise another $7+ million. So there's quite a few, and I think COVID does have a lot to do with it in terms of patterns that were established or unestablished. That people have not returned to behavior that they used to have. But I think costs are a big factor, and how we're choosing what projects folks are choosing to present in order to attract audiences, or what they think audiences want to see, and how expensive those projects have become. So that's,
well, there's a lot to parse there. Guy, say hi and let us know a little bit about your background. You're going to be providing an essential different point of view on a lot of this, because you're right there in the thick of things with indie theater, but I think you also are pretty aware of the regional theater situation.
Yeah. So hello everyone, my name is Guy Yedweb. I'm the president of the board of directors for the League of Independent Theater. The League of Independent Theater is for people who work in or run 99-seat or less theaters across the 5 boroughs of New York City. There are a lot of tiny venues scattered throughout the city with scrappy people trying to put up shows every week, and on the one end it's a little bit of a different ecosystem and budget from what the regional theaters are saying, and on the other side it's also a very common experience. Also, my wife is a Unitarian Universalist reverend, and she also needs to get butts in seats every Sunday for her she calls it a sermon, I call it a performance, but she's also seeing the same things about people not coming to participate quite as fully as they may have before the pandemic. On top of that, in the world of independent theater, the smallest budgets in New York, a lot of our member theaters are not, large institutions that own physical property. They're renting. They're small venues that rent from landlords, which provides this other dynamic, which is a lot of them were burdened by rent debt during the pandemic because the theaters were closed, but the leases were still open. And on top of that, rental debt hangover, they're having trouble meeting even the operating expenses that would be now. So we've seen a spate of closures, we've seen new spaces open, other ones closed permanently, and a lot of difficulty in keeping institutions in independent theater that have been around for a while.
And now we have the writer's strike and the director's strike affecting the whole film and TV industry as well. Jane, you raised your hand, so I think you wanted to add something.
Yeah, I think there's another aspect to this, which has to do with funding. I think one of the things that happened during the pandemic is that so many people had extra discretionary income for any number of reasons, including the fact that they weren't spending it on these entertainment types of things. And with all the different outreach and the dire predictions of if we don't get support, we're going to fail, that a lot of people, individuals, supported nonprofit institutions in a big way. That has fallen. And also, I think the same is true of large funders. Reading an article recently talking about how some major funders that used to fund 3 to 4 year commitments are funding 1 year commitments, et cetera, et cetera. And so organizations that were used to getting large grants or large donations from people are suffering because they're not getting the same kind of funding. And as we all know, from commercial theater as well, the ticket sales do not support the operations, fully support the operations from nonprofit theaters. And if funding goes away, or it diminishes even a little bit, then you have these budget gaps that can't be fulfilled, and so programming gets cut, which means less revenue in that sense, and et cetera, et cetera. So I think that's another branch of this. And also staffing, it's like it becomes a spiraling effect because staffing is cut, so there aren't as many people to go out and do the proper customer relations or investor relations or donor relations, and so people get upset that they're not being taken care of, and they reduce their giving, and on and on. And I think Rob could probably talk to some of that if that becomes a topic of conversation. But I think that's I think a piece of this that we're not always looking at carefully.
Yeah, I'm going to put all this on hold because I want to fulfill the promise of this community gathering, which is to answer the questions that the people in the room had. Owen, can you remind me of the things that were asked during the introductions?
Yeah, we had 2 questions. One was from Rob, the other was from Allie. Allie wanted to talk about taper going dark, and Rob just wanted to generally ask if how to make nonprofit more viable.
Allie, why don't you put on your sound and talk to us about your concerns about the taper.
And there was also another question about who do we want in the room? How do we get them there? Which was off topic, not on this same topic.
And you know what? Let's start with that one because it is off topic, so we can come back to the other things. Because I think once we really dig into the thing we're talking about right now, I don't think we're going to be able to let go of it for a while. There's a lot to talk about. Who wanted to ask the question about the how do you get the right
Don Loftus.
Don Loftus.
With me, yeah. And now it feels so selfish compared to this other topic. Much
Oh,
bigger
no.
issue.
No,
Um,
because my original intention was to make this a conversation with the room. I want to keep that.
Okay. Yeah, so we've been working on, as many of you have been, working on our musical for like 3 or 4 years, and we've gotten to a place where we have we feel it's pretty well finished, and we have been accepted in a few places. We're in a couple of festivals coming up. It was also accepted by this, there's this new university catalog that, this group that sends your musical to various universities for consideration and so on and so forth. But we're doing this fall, we're going to do an equity stage reading. I've already got space booked at the Dramatists Guild Foundation and so on. And we want to make sure that it's limited in capacity. And I want to make sure we get the right people there that can help us get it to the next step.
So isn't that the simple question? How do I get the right people into the rooms to help us go to the
How do
next
I
step?
reach them? How do I make them interested in it? Yeah.
Okay, Jane and RK, you both have a lot of experience in this area.
Start now.
Start now.
I mean, look,
book it now.
the reality is that the people that you want in the room are the same people that everybody wants in the room,
Right.
with the exception that that you may have a subject matter of your particular play that might appeal to people specifically. The only way you know that is if you get to know the universe of people that you want. So for everyone, 2 years before they want to do something, this is something that you need to be doing all the time, is meeting people, networking, expanding your universe, both amongst among other writers who can share their experiences and people that they've been successful with theaters that may be potential hosts of your show, and with commercial producers if that's the path that you're going. Those of us who are commercial producers get invitations to things all the time, and 90% of them are, I don't know who you are, I don't know why I'm interested in this. And it's and if it comes from someone I know, I'm at least going to look at it. But there's the rub. It has to be something, it can come from a general manager, like that's one way, is to engage a general manager or executive producer who's reputable and has a lot of contacts. General managers aren't necessarily there to promote your show. They're there to put the reading on. So you have to make sure that your general manager is willing to send an invitation out on your behalf from them. An executive producer is more likely to send an email out on your behalf. Anything that you can do to highlight why someone might be interested in you, but most of it is going to be if you have personal connections with people who you can call on to say, hey, can you be there? Or if you can't be there, can you send a representative, who can report back to you?
To state the obvious, Don, the other thing to think about, and I don't know if you can think about it at this point or not, attaching people to the show that are familiar, attaching a well-known actor, attaching a well-known director. The general manager is definitely the plan B, a very important plan B. Having a general manager who's known in the business is certainly going to get you credibility. It's all about building credibility, and it's what Jane's saying. Why should I go see this?
Well, I'm going to interject.
Okay.
Just to having networking and getting a list, you need to really develop a list, and you really need to develop a targeted list based on what you can find out about the people you want in the room. So who's produced what from a producer standpoint, on general managers who's worked on certain type of shows, are they alike to the shows that you have done? And then I have used a general manager who has, on my behalf, allowed me to target and get emails and information so that I might be able to approach the right people in the room. And, some people, if you can make an attractive invitation about why they would want to see it, and be specific. You can't do a general email. It has to be specific to the person, and if you can alter it in any way to make it specific to that person, that adds credence to your proposal. So the other thing is that, as Jane says, producers are going to shows all the time, and they have other commitments that they have to do. And so, they may be interested in your show, but they're not able to attend on that date. That doesn't mean to give up on them, but keep them involved. But if you can get some sort of communication back and forth between that of your targets and your show, then you want to hold on to those people as well as you build your list and complete it.
Amy Stoller
Yeah.
adds something, an interesting, different look at this. I think who do we want in the room and how we get them there is a good question regarding audiences in general. Sudden changes in programming have alienated an aging, largely white demographic, while not necessarily pulling in younger audiences or audiences of color. I feel theater needs everyone in the room or house, but how is that achievable? So that's a different aspect from what Don's talking about, but he's talking about specifically for the development of a new show, and you're talking about in
Right.
general the health of theater.
Right. I think, Bob, I think that comment is more relevant to the other conversation of like what's happened to theater audience in general.
I
But-
agree.
but-
I was just tossing it in there.
Right. But Don, another thing that you should think about is if your show is a musical,
Yes.
then is as part of your, right up in front and say, hey, folks, I have this great show, here's a listen. And it's like a 1 or 2 minute clip to get someone, just interested. Don't put in a 2-hour video. Don't put in a, 20-minute music segment. A minute, like a minute or two.
Short and sweet is perfect.
Yeah.
That's something for everybody that's doing speed date on Sunday. Short and sweet.
Good advice.
Yeah.
Yeah,
'cause
and
I-
even in like an email presentation, an email that sends out an invitation to something, having it as concise and well-written and short as possible.
And get it
a
up
link
front,
to
like,
something is right.
yeah, I
Okay,
mean,
Jane-
I have found myself, even when I get emails from personal emails, that if I read it on my phone, sometimes I miss the back half of it because I didn't scroll up, or you get a text and you didn't scroll up, or it's on the, it flashes on and I think that's the end of it. And then later I look at it and go, oh my God, I missed the most important part of the text. So whenever you're sending something out to people who you're trying to attract attention, get the heart of it right up front. You can say all the niceties later, but sometimes people aren't going to read through the whole, if there's a 10, 50 line email, you can be sure that people haven't made it all the way to the bottom.
So I do want to move on to other things. Michael DiCatano and Ali McLean, you have your hands raised. Is it about this conversation or is it about a different conversation?
This conversation, just coincidentally, just before we came on here, I got a follow on Threads from someone, a guy who's currently starring in a Broadway musical, who I met 3 years ago at one of Ken Davenport's festivals. And I told him about this character in my musical Miss Humanity, and he loved the idea. He said, just keep in touch. And then boom, just 15 minutes before you came on, he followed me on Threads, and I wrote, hey, good to see you again. I loved you in your show Sunday night, and I'm doing that character at 54 Below in the fall. And if you're available, I'd love to have you perform it. And so, I mean, that's how coincidental that is. When you do make a contact with somebody who is prominent, who will draw a crowd, those are the people you got to like stay in touch with.
Is this the Ryan Seacrest character?
Yes, it is.
Okay.
Yeah, if I could tag on to that, in my mind also, I think one of the aspects of that sticks out to me is that if people are only hearing from you when you want something or need something, then you're probably not building a lot of relationship with them, right? I think finding opportunities, and this is, I think, what RK was saying about targeting a list, because it's easier to build, a deeper, more authentic relationship with people when you have specific targets, right? If there's a theater company that's doing the kind of work that you're creating in a way that you feel would do justice for your play, and you're showing up to, when they have a panel discussion, and you're, lending your talents to things that they might be looking for, it becomes much easier to have that relationship. Whereas, as Jane was saying, if something is just coming out of the blue that says, hey, do my play, hey, do my play, they're likely hearing that all over the place. And it's not building that relationship. In the world of independent theater, everyone is always putting on projects that need help and that need, more talents and more people, more feedback. And, someone who is coming to the table to give as well as, ask and create, more of a collaborative environment, I think that goes a long way.
Could not agree with you more, Guy. And, and I think the other thing I want to add here is, let's demystify theater. Theater is a business. And just like in any other business, people want to do business with people they want to do business with. And so the only way you know that is if you know the people. And it's why people tend to work with the same teams over and over again, or not, if they've had a bad experience. And it's a small business, so it's a small world. So if you have a good reputation, then other people are going to want to work with you. If you have a bad reputation, that's going to get around as well. And it's really all about getting to know as many people as you can in a positive way when you're not asking for something, so that when you are asking for something, it's a natural part of a conversation. Continue to keep people updated on what you are on what you're doing, without saying, can you do this for me? Because the question is, why? Like, tell me why I should do this for you. What have you done? Like, not that it's a quid pro quo, but there are so many people looking for help. What have you done to help the people that you're asking? Or what might you do to benefit? What's good is going to come out of the relationship for both parties, not just me. Right? You got to think of who it is that you're talking to. What can you offer? Part of what you can offer as writers, for example, is knowledge of the industry. That's why what TRU does with these conversations on Friday, with the PDMP program, with panels and all of that, is so that you have knowledge of the industry and can speak intelligently and have the right expectations of things that can happen. We're not miracle workers. We can't just turn a switch on and go, oh, okay, boom, your show is on Broadway. But you can help yourself, knowing the answers to some of the questions that that are being raised here, and being prepared and being helpful and being participatory in your own success.
Let's move to Allie McLean, because I think it's related to the original topic we were talking about before, I think.
Yeah, well, I actually went to a panel discussion a few weeks back that Lindsay Alba, who's one of the ADs of the Taper, was there. And it was this discussion about what's happening to the theater. And it was after they had decided to shutter the Taper. And some of the things that she said were that this had been kind of a thing that was a long time coming, that there had been a decline in the sense that the person who's the AD before had stopped working with the local community and developing things locally, and had been putting an emphasis on having West Coast premieres of New York shows, which is a big thing here. A lot of the smaller theaters here want to have the West Coast premiere because it has this kind of shine to it. And that shuts out a lot of, writers here who have new works. So that was an issue. And there was just a lot of money issues that they just became, it just wasn't viable. But also there was an issue with some of the people that they, there's like this core group of writers that they, like 20 or so, 30 writers that they keep using that they call emerging, who I don't think are emerging. Like I love Rajiv Joseph to death. He's one of my favorites and he's a friend, but you know, I don't see him as emerging. He's been on Broadway. So when they bring his play and you say he's a new playwright or an emerging playwright, I find that a little bit off, you know? So it's stuff like that.
Well, this touches on one of the things that I was thinking earlier, which is I think a lot of the problem was the Icarus syndrome. Basically, it's I think a lot of not-for-profits have, by being competitive, have tried to grow beyond their capabilities, and then they get in trouble because they get so big and they can't support it. I don't know. Do you think any of that's the problem with? That's why I said originally, I think it's a lot of it has to do with bad planning. I don't think it's just COVID related. I don't think it's shutdown related.
No, they said, well, she said that, you know, a lot of people, and I think someone had said before, you know, the audiences, a lot of the people who bought packages were, you know, like older white audiences, and they stopped buying packages. And part of that was to do with the fact that after George Floyd, there was a lot of emphasis on having BIPOC and, underrepresented writers being given commissions, and that people weren't coming out to see those. I'm of the idea that it wasn't because they were underrepresented voices. It was sometimes the underrepresented voices particularly weren't strong. You know, I mean, I think there was some writers that were great, but some of them, they were just sort of arbitrarily because it was a quota, and they weren't picking writers who were super strong.
Well, that's not around the regional theater area for, to involve the community and broaden the community, in part because they were losing that older white audience, and then to be able to be more responsive to the new mix of what that community was, whether it was in Seattle or in Louisville, for instance. Trying to reach out to that audience never replaced, the economic value that their traditional audience had done. And so, in addition to all the other things, and I do think COVID was still a major thing, and we can even go back to the recession of 2008, 2009, that we're still kind of dealing with as well, to be able to support the type of infrastructure that a live theater has. So in the mix there, and I think you're absolutely right, Ali, is that, this push to broaden an audience and also, work with the community was also something that was happening all at the same time. And it just wasn't bringing in the same kind of money that it had before.
I think if you look in the chat, Amy Stoller just wrote, COVID exposed the cracks of the system. And I think that's so spot on, that some of these things that you're talking about, Ali, were actually, they were happening beforehand. And then, everybody shut down. And some people use that time to refocus or redirect. I refuse to use the word pivot because it's so overused at this point. But some people,
thank you for not using it.
Thank you. Yeah. What some people looked at what they were doing and did different things during COVID, and then went right back to,
Right.
Oh, now we're going again. And the reality is, when you own your space, like that's a tremendous overhead, and it's just gotten more and more expensive. And so people program to what they think is like what people want to hear. And maybe the audience, someone wrote earlier something about the audiences, speak with their feet. They're programming things that, audiences maybe that's not what they want to hear, or it's not the same quality. And part of that is having trouble with staffing. We're a small company, Houses on the Moon, a small company in New York. We did 2 plays in 2020, what year are we in? We're in 20. We did 2 plays in 2022, which were the first 2 plays we had done since 2019 because of COVID. And we had trouble hiring designers. We had trouble hiring people because everybody was trying to hire the same people. Everybody was coming back. And so everybody's costs were higher. And again, it just spirals.
Yeah.
But we don't own a building. We weren't
Right.
under the pressure to have programming in the building at all times.
Well,
And
that's what I was trying to say earlier about the Icarus syndrome. It's basically aspiring beyond, without setting a foundation, aspiring to things that may be beyond your ultimate capability. But I mean, then there's always the idea that, you know, you have to aim high, and it's the Indian rope trick. You throw the rope up in the air and you climb it.
Someone
Like
on the panel actually said, you know, the restaurants are full and like 6 is selling out. Beetlejuice just had to add more dates. Now, obviously, I know those are Broadway shows that are, you know, those are big shows that are touring, but people are spending money on that. But, you know, if you look at the regional theaters right now, like the Kirk Douglas has Fetch Clay Make Man, and the Geffen has Mountaintop, and those 2 shows have very similar themes. One is, you know, a show about what if Muhammad Ali had this conversation during this time, and what if Martin Luther King had this conversation during this time. And it's like, well, if you're going to splash out your money on one of them, they're kind of they're very similar. I mean, so it's like, they're doing these shows, nobody's talking to each other. That was another thing. None of these theaters are in community with each other. They're very competitive. So they're not looking at each other and what each other is doing. So like, if I'm a consumer, I might not, and I'm not a theater goer, I might not pay to go see both. And so one is going to make more money than the other. And so the seasons are kind of conflicting with each other. And so that's the reason why that, you know, they're not really full houses right now.
Well, certainly.
Well, I think that's always been
a fundraising standpoint. One of the reasons why Theater Forward was created was to allow all the theaters to work together and not compete for, you know, grant and corporate money as well. And so it's similarly trying to get everybody to work together and communicate together so that they wouldn't be in competition. Now, I'll just say that I'm going to be leaving in about 5 minutes. So if we have any specific questions that can be addressed to me, that would be great. I've got to meet Jake down at Joe's Pub, so sorry.
Yeah, you stood him up the last time. You can't do it again. Susan Crawford.
I just hit send.
Oh,
So
okay.
I don't know if this is part of RK's venue, but I'm wondering about people's opinion about putting our show on as a cabaret, as some kind of halfway point between a showcase, which only runs for 12 performances, and who knows if you'll get the people you want to see it within those 12 performances, or, you know, spending the next year to 2 years trying to get a workshop going through producers. In other words, we get it up on our own 1 or 2 nights a week for some period of time, say 6 weeks, and invite people to come see it, including producers. So I'm just curious about opinions among your very learned people here.
So this was a cabaret idea? Is that right?
Yeah, using a cabaret contract.
Yeah, well, we developed Cougar the Musical, which, you know, kind of was spawned by meeting with TRU in cabaret. We developed it over a period of 1.5 years, doing 1 or 2 shows a month and getting audience reaction and promoting it, and even testing the material and songs that we put it in. So I found it to be a really useful tool for this kind of musical, and we finally were able to put together a full-length musical based on the bits that we had developed with Donna Moore and Cougar.
Yeah, I would say that, see previous conversation about if you want to have the right people in the room, why will the right people come into the room? So if you have more opportunities and more dates, then obviously you have more opportunities for people to come see it. But you still have to have a reason that people are going to want to come, other than your friends and random people. So also, I've heard a lot of people say things like, if you're going to invite someone to, like a cabaret space, they usually, there's usually food and or drink minimums and things like that. And so that's something you need to think about. If you're inviting a producer to come see your show, are you going to cover, you can cover their tickets, or you're going to cover their minimums and things like that? Because people, they might not be interested in spending, $40 on 2 watered down drinks to see your show. So that's just something to think about. But if you have, a good list of people that can see the show, having it spread out is great, because so often someone says, oh, I'm doing a reading on July 23rd. That's a Sunday, on July 24th. And it's like, oh, well, people are not here on July 24th, they can't come. And that's the end of your exposure. But if I'm doing it for the next 6 Mondays, chances are you're going to be able to get them into the room.
Guy, I want to bring you into the conversation because you're the guy that knows the smaller theater spaces around the city and around the country. And I think mostly you're kind of New York based, aren't you?
Yes, I am. Yeah.
And one of the things that people might want to consider as part of their development process is getting to know small theater companies in the city and sort of hooking up with them. Goes back to what Jane was saying, though. You have to join the company because you want to help them, and then maybe they'll help you. So can you give us a little bit of an overview of some of the companies that are part of LIT and how people can become part of LIT too?
Yeah, in terms of, joining the League of Independent Theater, it's a free membership open to anyone who is, working in the field. So you can just go to the website, which I'll drop in the chat in a moment, and use the sign up form. There are, dozens, if not, over 100 small size theater companies. And to the point before, some of them are very focused on just producing, Edwardian drama. Some of them are very focused on producing, the next, some of them are residency, devised theater companies. So you really need to know which of those companies are out there. But one of the advantages is that they tend to be fairly flexible and fairly quick moving. Many of them are not even in the realm of planning season to season. Some of them are just going from, show to show as they put it up. And so, particularly if you're really trying to just get a proof of concept or, something small off the ground in a quick way, I think independent theaters in New York can be there. But because of the size of these, things, the fact that it's still a business, and independent theaters in particular are dealing with very small margins and don't have endowments or capital programs supporting them, it needs to be something that you need to think through what that model is. I think I would agree wholeheartedly with Jane about, even if it's fewer performances over a longer span of time, word of mouth takes time, and I'm in New York City. I see so many show invitations and everything, and the amount of shows that I'm like, all right, I'm finally going to sit down and see that show. It closed last Thursday. Gosh darn it. I finally wrapped my brain around the impulse to go. And oops, it's passed. So, think about how you're going to make it accessible to folks. But I think independent theaters in New York are a great place to just get it on its feet, get some video of it, get some, some small press clippings, even from it's a small blog, to really start to prove out that concept.
Well, RK had to leave. I knew he was leaving at 6:15. I should have told everybody before. We have Eric Jones and Melissa Center both have their hands up, and also we never addressed Rob Hoffman's question from the beginning. Rob, did you want to bring that up again, or has some of it been covered already?
I think a lot of it's been covered, and I'm just in a listening mode, so I'm good.
Okay, so Melissa, I saw your hand go up first, so let us know what you wanted to talk about.
It's an extension of this conversation that I'm curious about with a model of, smaller performances, but over a longer period of time, whether that's in a cabaret context or even in partnership with theaters. How does that then work with like equity contracts and all of that? Is that even a feasibility?
No, it's not with equity. And the other thing that, I mean, if you're going to do an equity showcase, I always recommend fewer weeks and more performances in each week, rather than spreading it out over a longer time. Only because you have to pay for the venue.
Right.
More than likely, you have to pay for the full week for the venue. If there's a case, there are occasional cases where you can actually be sharing the venue with someone else, but that's also not very comfortable in terms of your production needs.
Yeah.
So,
Well, it can be. I mean, I think one of the things, I'm sorry, Guy, I didn't mean to cut you off there, but some theaters are dark on Mondays and Tuesdays, and to be able to slot yourself in and share the space, is, and the showcase, I'm so out of touch of what a showcase code is these days, and I think everybody everything keeps changing. But the thing about smashing performances into a short period of time is you won't get certain kinds of attention. If you can do 4 performances a week for 4 weeks, you're better off than having 8 performances a week for 2 weeks, because the people who saw it the first week, you don't have time to get the word spread if you're trying to spread the word. So cost is definitely a factor, but I'm sure that Guy's organization has a lot of people who probably would welcome the chance to share their space, because it helps cut and share costs.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think this is why the festival model is really, something that's out there. There are a lot of micro festivals out there, small targeted, festivals. And, I know people, if a few theater companies get together and just program a space for a bit, you can turn that into a little festival. It has some marketing upside. The other aspect is, thinking about what exactly your performance needs. A lot of what I'm seeing in independent theater is work that is exploring immersive or, site-specific qualities. So, for example, this is a few years ago, but Adam Simkowitz's was the playwright, the show Clown Bar, right? Set in a bar. They found a local bar. The bar wasn't in the model that a theater is of requiring you to rent week to week. That bar was more interested in the drinks that people were buying, and having a show there that attracts people to come was good for them. So it was win-win all around, and they were able to do, I think, 2 months of performances with 2 performances a week. Not possible under the showcase code in equity. So that's something that we're frustrated by and would love to be able to have further conversations with equity about. But the sacrifice is you don't have a proscenium theater with a light grid, right? So this is where the questions of what does the work you want to produce need, what are the flexibility that's out there for different ways of imagining it.
Susan, your hand is still.
And what your audience, if you have a core audience, not every audience needs fantastically produced $24 million production values. A lot of times, if you have good words or good music, you can present it in a way that's appealing to people. And in fact, it's sometimes more appealing to people because they get much closer to the artist, they get closer to the art, they get to give feedback and things like that. So you have to find the audience for the kind of work that you're presenting, and not just theater, like theater people.
Susan,
yeah.
Susan Crawford, did you want to say more?
Yeah, I just wanted to add that I did speak to Equity today, and they do have a cabaret contract that one would need to use for this kind of undertaking. But it seems very flexible, because I said, well, if we did 2 nights a week for 6 weeks, for instance, and they have tier A for that. And then if it goes over 4 performances, it's the next tier up. And in terms of the costs, it didn't feel that onerous compared to if we tried to, definitely if we tried to get a workshop going ourselves, but even like a workshop with, you know, all the right staffing and so on would probably cost at least as much. And I had just heard about a woman who had a workshop going, and the person who was going to do all the outreach to the producers got COVID. And so there was no outreach to producers in her 12 performances. So
Susan,
that's what.
Susan, I have a question about the cabaret contract. Does the cabaret contract allow dialogue? Because there is an equity cabaret contract that you can use, but you're not allowed to actually, you can only do the songs. You really can't do the script. There may be something else now.
My understanding is there is, because you can do a 90-minute presentation. And I did say this is a musical, and, you know, rather than just do the songs, I think she understood what I was saying, because we don't have 90 minutes of songs. So yes, there are these different tiers, and also they're just about to alter the contract even more after October. So this was circa right now. But it actually seemed manageable. So that's, and I wanted to hear what people had to say. So what RK had to say was especially helpful, because that's what we're thinking of. If we can work on the show over time, that would be more helpful than a crash course and then closing.
I do encourage everybody to call equity if you have questions about contracts. It's the only way you're going to get the real deal. That's the real information. They don't let us see the contracts anymore, so you have to ask them what's allowed and what's not allowed.
Yeah.
Eric Jones, your hand must be so tired by now.
It is, but I think a guy kind of asked my question, because there was another thing I was thinking about, alternative forms of entertainment when it comes to immersive, because I think I have one musical that I could definitely see it as an immersive show. It could be done under like a big top, and that was something I was thinking about doing. But also I was also thinking about maybe the possibility of maybe doing like podcast musicals, actually do a musical podcast, and maybe in 4 or 5 different episodes. Split it up.
You're talking right to Jane Dubin's heart, because that's what she's doing right now.
Okay.
Eric,
Because
I think that's an amazing idea. Yeah, I mean, I'm doing that with the Village of Vale. It's not a minor undertaking, because you do have to rewrite your script, because you can't see things unless you want to have, you know, reading stage directions. But I mean, I'll give the shortest version I can here. But if you're developing a show and you need to do if you're going to do a 29-hour reading, depending on what, you know, the format it is, it's, you know, $25,000-$30,000 potentially. If you want to do a workshop, capital W, you could be talking $500,000. If you're going to do an enhancement in a regional, you're talking a few $1,000,000. We're doing what we're doing for less than the cost of a workshop, at the end of which we'll have 3.5 hours. It's a little bit long now for regular music, but we'll have an asset that we can share with everybody. In fact, you know, hopefully by the fall, we have the first hour of the show. I can share it with you. I have fully orchestrated music, and I've done it at a much, much lower cost than any other form. And it's on-demand listening. It's a little bit like what RK did with his film. They spent more money than we did, but it allows anyone who might be interested today or a year from now to hear the music, the story. It's acted out, it's sound designed, and such. So it's, I think, a pretty interesting way, and a very different way, and avoids all of the things you're talking about. Now, monetizing is another part of it, and that's a much longer discussion, too long for here. But you know, there are other ways, and I also wanted to say to you, to Melissa, to Susan, whoever, that doing a show in Manhattan isn't necessarily the only option. There are a lot of theaters outside of New York City that are close enough, that aren't necessarily subject to the same kinds of restrictions, that allow you to invite people. It may be a little bit far for them to go, but you also may get different insight from different kinds of audiences, depending on what your objective is for doing a performance.
Yeah. I would add on the subject of kind of, immersive or non-traditional theater, two things. One is, I think that, if you think about the work that you want to create in the landscape of all of the things that are available to people, right? They could spend their evening watching Netflix on their, tablet. They could go and see a Broadway show. They could, they could do a lot of different things with their time. But what is what you're doing going to stand out and be different? And I think that if, I look at it from the perspective of independent theater. If you're trying to put on a Broadway musical, but without the Broadway budget and scale, what you're going to wind up with might be something that's compromised, as opposed to if you make the limited size and scope the point, right? If you put that at the center. And so I think when it comes to things that are immersive or outside of traditional spaces, if you really use that as an advantage and make it the centerpiece, it can really stand out. If you don't have a lot of experience with that kind of stuff, I would recommend following either the newsletter or the podcast of No Pro or No Proscenium. They basically highlight, they have geographically specific, like New York and Los Angeles, and then like a general across the United States one, where you can just get a sampling of, what are the kinds of things that people are doing outside of a theater. In New York, we have email newsletters like The Skint and Nonsense NYC that, again, are just showing these like very different kinds of events that, people are, really, really being drawn to. I had a friend who for several years did a solo show that was storytelling inside a bathtub. And so she would go from city to city, finding people who had a bathtub, with enough room for 7 people to come sit around it. And she would tell the story while in the bath. It was perfect for the kind of work that she wanted to do, intimate storytelling, close. But I think that a lot of people wouldn't have come to see intimate, close storytelling of that kind just on a stage with a microphone, in the way that, oh, what's this thing in a bathtub? Like, what is that? And business-wise savvy, she didn't have to pay a lot of money for these bathtubs. She could tour it anywhere, just as well as she could get around, and the cost per show is low enough that she could just keep going and take it wherever she wants, eventually turning it, documentaries in the works and things like that. But that's the kind of idea of, and it only works for her show, right? Your show may not be like, I'm just gonna
If you like this conversation, come back on the 28th when Ann Hamburger of On Guard Arts and Anita Durst of Shishama are going to be blowing your mind with things that are crazier than a woman doing a narrative in a bathtub.
Yeah, two great.
Hey, I did a show. I'm working with my partner on a show that involves cooking, and we did it in our kitchen, and for a dozen people, and cooked, told stories, people participated. And, I think people were being honest with it because they stuck around for a long time. People really enjoyed it. They enjoyed the intimacy of the performance and of the audience. Like, it wasn't random people.
Did you feed them?
But we fed them.
Okay.
Yeah.
Makes all the difference. I suggest feeding people, no matter what your show is, feed people.
Right.
We've got Janet, Catherine, and Eric. So let's start with Janet Conrad.
Hi, I had been thinking, so intrigued by what Jane's doing with radio, and I was very interested in Eric's question. I can't help thinking that it might be a great thing to have a TRU workshop or a TRU or something very, very good where people could learn the skills that Jane has amassed and the knowledge for radio. And it could also help having people feel the flexibility to do that, to bring the plays to wider audiences for producing it more complex and more venues. So I'm not saying this as a suggestion, I'm just saying it is something where it's so exciting that I have to restrain myself from suggesting it.
Restrain yourself, Janet. Restrain yourself.
I'm trying to. And then also I think the bathtub people should become organized and teach people how to find their ways to immersive theater.
And literally immersive. She's immersed in water.
That was
really
accidental. I wasn't that clever, but thank you for noticing it.
Yeah. Okay. Catherine Paulson.
Yeah,
So-
hi, I was
Follow
thinking-
that, Catherine, just try.
No, well,
Yeah,
actually,
submersive,
will mention-
submersive theater. Look at the
I
chat.
will mention, oh gee, maybe 10 or 15 years ago, there was a site-specific play, an adaptation of Melville's The Confidence Man done on a boat called the Lilac. And there were, and it was free. You had to line up to, and there were, I think there were different docents who took you around from scene to scene. Anyway, it was great. It was one of the most memorable site-specific shows I've ever seen. But I was remembering a previous TRU gathering having to do with public theaters, and specifically Cleveland was one of them. And I don't
Raymond
remember
Bobcat.
all the details, but boy, it seemed like they were so engaged with and the community, and really, you know, that was their kind of mission, to serve the community. And it sounded like they were doing pretty well. And I think ticket prices were one of the things.
Well, they're very, very well funded, the Cleveland Playhouse.
I figured, yeah.
Cleveland Public Theater, yeah. We had conversations about that. Yeah, Raymond's mission is to provide affordable theater for everybody. So the ticket pricing is ridiculous at that theater.
But it's getting harder for him.
Is it?
Oh.
Yeah. And some of it has to do with the funder. I mean, there was a great article in the industry section of Broadway World, and one of the things it talks about is the funders things that I mentioned earlier. And they said that MacArthur, was it the MacArthur Foundation used to do 3- and 5-year funding. That was one of the major foundation pieces of this particular theater. Suddenly, and with almost no notice, out of the arts, and has left giant holes in many of our budgets. You know, those things, that's, you know, when you, it's great when you get a big grant, and I can speak for my own company and for other nonprofits I'm involved with, but it also makes you very dependent on that one grant. And if something changes, it's like, wow, how do we replace that? That was, you know, that was 10% or 15% of our budget. And I think that's some of the things that people are experiencing.
I'm actually going to bring everybody into the room. I'm going to take the spotlights off, and we're just going to be a big community right now. So put yourself on gallery view, everyone. And anybody who doesn't have their camera on, please feel free to turn it on. Again, the point of this is for us to see you and to be interacting with you. Eric, and then Steve Fisher. Eric? Why do I think it's going to be something to do with VR?
Oh, it's a good guess. This is kind of a vain hope, but the actors' unions have been very, very hesitant to adopt anything virtual. And I have a real hope with all this discussion about how AI figures into the future with the contracts that they're negotiating now, that the unions will really take a strong look at all the different possibilities for virtual performance of various kinds. And
yeah, but Eric,
they're
focused right now on what they're focused on right now is our studios are saying that they want to be able to bring an actor in, photograph them, and then use their image indefinitely, for forever, after they come in and just are recorded once. They use that as a basis for an AI presentation, and that's what the key is. There may be other useful parts of AI, but I don't think anybody's looking at them right now. They're just looking at the fact that the studios are basically saying something that's, to my thinking, is really foul.
I think that's a big mistake, because that's only the current major problem that people are thinking about. But AI is going to be developing and changing greatly over the next few years, and not to think about all the different ways that it can be good for everybody to use it and bad for everybody in certain ways would be a mistake to focus on just that one issue.
Yeah, I know. Eric, I think that people probably are thinking about that. What?
It can't be good for everybody if there isn't built into the contract
adequate, fair compensation commensurate with the worth of the actor's work or the writer's work, because this is also an issue in the Writers Guild strike. Nobody is saying AI doesn't have possibility.
Right.
What they're saying is you can't use our work for a one-time low payment in perpetuity for any usage whatever without our permission, because you now own our voice, our likeness, our words. The issue is not the possibilities of AI. The
And-
issue is the laborer is worthy of their hire.
So Eric, what's happening is that one issue is being battled right now. So nobody's really talking about the other issues. I agree
That's
with
what I'm talking about.
Yeah,
What
no,
I'm
but
talking
Amy, but
about is
listen
that
to
that's a
Amy.
mistake,
Amy's
because
right. Amy
this
is right.
this is going to be-
People are thinking about it. People
I
are
don't think
aware
this
of
is
it.
really, I don't mean to interrupt here, but I don't think this is the forum
Okay.
for debating a union position and it's a strike or not strike. And
Just
maybe we can move
expressing a
on.
hope.
I think your hope will be fulfilled. Once they get past this particular issue and settle it, they will probably be using AI in more in smarter ways in terms of the relationship between the creator and the producers. Steve Fisher.
Yeah, piggybacking on what Jane was saying about funding, I started a nonprofit from nothing and know all the rewards and challenges. But I'm thinking also about Crossroads Theater. They did a reading of my play back in, I don't know, 2000, and I don't know if any of you know Rick Kahn, great guy, but
He was a guest here about a month or two ago.
oh my gosh, actually I've lost touch with him, so I'd love to get back in touch with him, but super guy. But I couldn't fathom how a theater that won the Tony Award for Best Regional Theater closed the next year, basically. And I remember him telling me it was because we were so reliant on the big grants, we forgot how much money is $50 and $100. That's a lot of money for somebody to write a check. And we forgot about those smaller donations. And
well, Crossroads is back.
One big grant dried up and it was all over again.
Steve, are you saying that Crossroads closed?
I mean,
because it's up and running now.
Yeah, but I mean, it was on this trajectory. I mean, you know, to win the Tony for Best Regional Theater, you know, it was headed in a particular, and then it really was gutted. As we're talking about some of the theaters that now were gutted, and maybe they're back, but it's, in my estimation, it's never really been the same.
So Steve, did you know Lee?
I knew Lee a bit, yeah.
Yeah, he was my teacher, my theater teacher at Temple. Great guy. I was so disappointed that he died during COVID. So upset about that.
Oh, did he?
Yeah, you know, because he's obviously one of the founders of Crossroads, but
he actually directed the play that they did a workshop of.
Yeah, he passed away during COVID. I was so upset.
He was something.
Yeah.
That's all.
So again, to the room, and do you want to be part of the conversation? Do you want to have your voice heard? I mean, that's what we're trying to do today. To Christian Shearer, you're new to TRU, so say hi and tell us a little bit about what your thoughts are.
Hi. Well, I mean, this is my first community TRU meeting that I'm a part of, so I'm just kind of absorbing. I'm relatively new to the theater industry. I mean, I was working marketing until 2019 and then quit to get into acting, and then the pandemic happened a couple months later. Yeah, it was well, you know what, it gave me an opportunity to not do anything but work on my own show, which was nice. But you know, I'm just witnessing kind of all of these ongoing changes with theater, and it's, I mean, not that it's disillusioning. Once you get into it, you kind of see the behind the scenes of you know, how things work, and you know, what shows kind of are able to thrive. But especially, this whole group meeting is about kind of how theater is operating now, and as we're kind of getting back to normal. And I think, there was somewhere in the chat, someone mentioned that inflation and it not being affordable for people is really a huge issue, because I think there's some great shows that are just people just can't afford to go. I know I myself have to be kind of picky with what shows I spend money on, on tickets, which it stinks because there's so many shows that I do want to see.
That's been that's been an ongoing struggle. I mean, even before COVID. I mean, I know myself here, I'm running this organization about theater, and I had to really, really be careful picking and choosing what I could afford to see in any given year. I wasn't seeing more than 2 or 3 Broadway shows a year. I just couldn't afford it. And so obviously that's still a problem. And it's really affecting the bottom lines for a lot of the shows right now. The ones that are doing well are doing well. I mean, Hugh Jackman was selling tickets throughout COVID. People would come in triple mask just to see him. I'm actually one of the people. I've had COVID 4 times, so I'm not comfortable going into crowds, but I do it anyway. It's like I get COVID, I get over it. It's what are you going to do at this point? But there is a definite problem in terms of getting the audiences back to the point where they were before the shutdown. Jane, what are some of the shows that are doing well, and what are the ones that are struggling or closing?
I think plays in general are, it's always been the case, but plays in general are not doing as well as they might have. Even I don't think Jessica Chastain really pulled in the audience that they thought she was going to pull in for A Doll's House.
Yeah.
I think some of the really, I don't want to say brainless, but like that kind of mentality with the Britney Spears.
You don't say vapid. It's okay.
Vapid, or the shows that have been constructed and timed to come in that are purely entertainment. I heard a friend of mine today said she just saw Shucked, and she's like, if you want to just go and be stupid, they have the dumbest jokes, but that's funny. Like that, I don't know that Shucked has really gotten to a point yet where it's making money, but Six certainly is, and the Britney Spears thing seems to be doing well. Back to the Future has started off really well. A lot of the plays that have come in that people are trying to bring in diversity are not doing well. It's not necessarily I did Dana H and Is This a Room right after COVID, and the theory was that this is a New York show, people will come out, and the New Yorkers, the older New York population was not coming back like they were. A lot of people have moved. New York isn't the same New York it was 4 years ago in terms of the audience.
It was actually dangerous at the early days of COVID. It's not as dangerous now. I think that's another aspect of all of this, is that there's this perception, which seems to be incorrect, that inner cities have become, not inner cities, but downtown metropolitan areas have become so dangerous, and like, oh my God, you can't go to the theater. There's gonna be crime. You can't do this. And that's held some people back. And it's all this stuff, popcorn shows. Thank you. That's a great expression. And all of this is going to take time. I think, some of the foreign tourists, now with the euro at $1.12 instead of 99 cents, maybe the Europeans will come back, because, the euro took such a drastic hit against the dollar. Things were so much more expensive for Europeans. And it's a little less expensive than it was a year ago. So, it's just it just takes time. I don't know what the expression is, like it takes how long to form a habit and how long to unform it. For people, the other problem is New York City office occupancy is like 50%. It dropped during July 4th week. If people aren't in the city, it's not as convenient to just stay after work, grab a drink, go see a show, and then go home. You're home. I live in the suburbs. For me to come into the city to see a show is
a big deal. It's not just, have a couple meetings, grab some dinner and go to a show. It's take the train, an hour, it could be an hour, like I have to leave an hour and a half before showtime, see the show, miss the train because there's only a limited schedule at night. And it could be like 6 hours. It's 6 hours for me to come in to do a reading. I got to really want to go see that reading. So people's travel behaviors have changed and they're working from home. It's much more of an effort, gotta put on real clothes. You gotta, if you're driving into the city, it's a big deal. So there's a lot of audience behavior that has to come back to normal. It's just going to take more time than people want it to take. And in the meantime, all these other things that we've talked about have impacted. So some shows, yes, the Sixes and Britney Spears shows and things like that we can have some successful shows. And then you add on to that the Wickeds and, Hamiltons and such, they're Lion Kings that are taking the big chunks. It doesn't leave as much room for all the other shows to be successful. That's the problem. So, and this is a trend that's been going along. There was a time where people came to New York, they did 5 shows in 3 days or something like that. Now it maybe is 3 shows, or maybe now it's 2 shows or 1 show because things have gotten more expensive.
Eric, I would just want to say, yes, I hope that you're right. I hope that this is an opportunity for them to get the contracts right so that we can build the future on top of something that will work for everybody. So that's what we're all hoping. AI is not going to go away. We know that. So, and the studios know that, and the unions all know that. We all know that. So we have to find a way of living with AI, and living with it and it being to our advantage to do so. I want to ask Guy to say a few words in summary of what you think is going on and where we are right now in theater, and then we're going to close up for today because I have to go cook dinner and I have to get things ready for speed date. So Guy, it's up to you now.
Yeah, I mean, it's certainly no easy task to take all of the different threads that we've been running along and kind of pull it together. But I think that a lot of it boils down to is 2 things. I think the first thing is, what is it that you're trying to bring? What of what you're trying to bring is what's actually needed right now? Really focus in on, who needs to hear it? Why do you want to bring it to the table? Where does it fit the best? Because I think sort of doing things on autopilot because, these sorts of plays have been successful in the past or, whatever it is, there's no autopilot right now. Things are tougher and you got to really focus on, on the things that are really needed and the gaps that are out there. And the other part is relationship. I think we talked about relationship within our industry in terms of, not just transactional moment to moment, but really building deep relationship and connection with the other people who are creating, whether it's producers, whether it's, actors or designers, the people that you need in order to be able to do the work that you're doing. It needs to be a genuine and deep-rooted connection, and the solidarity, that we need to be talking more, not just about our projects, but also about the things, whether it's the political landscape or whether it's the, union landscape that is impacting our work. We need to be working together on tackling those. And also the relationship to the audience, that also can't be transactional, and it can't just be at the moment that you want something from them, right? I think all of those things are the same. You need to build those deep relationships, sustain them, not just transactionally. And I think then your work will flourish.
Well, thanks,
And Bob, before you end things, I want to say one more thing, because I think a lot of this conversation has been based in a lot of pessimism, and I myself can fall prey to that because things aren't back to where they were. But what I want to say, and I, not everybody is still here, but there are people here who have had some real bona fide success as we go through here. And I think we need to understand that success means a lot of different things, and to not get discouraged, and perhaps to set sights that are specific to your piece and not not set unrealistic or you know, match your piece to the people who you think the piece works with, both in terms of audience and also in terms of collaborators and partners. Think outside the box, not to be cliche, but not every show needs to follow that path that has been predetermined as the way you get a show to theater. There are a lot of different paths, and a lot of them are still open. And you know, if you are creative, if you are knowledgeable about how the process works, people want to work with you. Like that's the mother lode for a producer, for a theater company, when they have people who can be supportive and assist in the process, and not, you know, that's a positive. And so a plug for TRU here is for those of you who don't know about the producer development mentorship program. It's not just for producers, it's also for artists who are self-producing. I think Nico is the example of creating a monster in that regard, of someone who walked in here as a writer and was like, I don't want to produce. And she's now like, you know, I wouldn't be surprised if she's the lead producer on Broadway in the next 5 years. But as artists, the more you know about the process, the better it will be, the more success you'll have, and the more you'll have the ability to think outside the conventional path, which has admittedly gotten more difficult. But I want people to stay encouraged and positive and support each other, because that's the most important part. This is the community where you can start, you know, doing those kinds of things and developing the relationships, not only with each other, but with each other's contacts.
Thank you, Jane, and thank you, Guy, and thank you, now absent RK, and thank you to the community for being here today. For those of you out there who have discovered us on YouTube or have discovered us on your favorite podcast station, if you'd like to be part of the room and be part of the community, we welcome you. I can make that happen. You can just email me at trunltd@aol.com, trunltd@aol.com. We'll start sending you the Zoom link, and you can come into the room and be part of these weekly talks. Also, we do this as a public service. We've been doing it since April 17th, 2020, just a month after shutdown started. It's pay what you can. That means you can come for free. It also means that if you want to support us, you can do that too. You can give us a little bit of support, a little bit of love, a little bit of money by going to TRU Donate, trudonate.org, trudonate.org. And we'd appreciate it, because we're coming back into live performance and we have additional expenses to cover now. And that's it. Thank you, and I hope you'll join us in the weeks to come.